Today, Debbie Flower and myself travel to the Sacramento Rose Society meeting where we share 10 essential gardening tips covering seed germination, soil health, pest management in order for you to have a thriving garden. A lot of these tips for garden success just might have you saying, I did not know that. It's episode 392 of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. No, we're not podcasting from the Barking Dog Studios in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban Purgatory today, but we are still brought to you by Dave Wilson Nursery. Let's go.
We are very honored here tonight to have two of our best known garden experts in the greater Sacramento area. People that are both legends in their own time. Farmer Fred Hoffman, you may have known from many, many years on your radio dial, and now he's on your URL and with his weekly podcast.
Every Friday.
And along with Fred tonight is Debbie Flower, who is an institution from American River College. She ran the horticulture department there for many, many years and helped make ARC a great hort school for a lot of people. And I have bought many beautiful plants from your plant sale. I know. So without further ado, I am going to turn the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate that. Debbie Flower, of course, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor.
For him.
With not only American River College, but Sierra College, Folsom Lake College.
El Dorado Center.
All sorts of places.
Skills Center.
Yeah. She gets around, yes. And she has been on the podcast. I've been doing the podcast since March of 2020. She's been there the whole time helping out, and I appreciate it. America appreciates her, too. The podcast is just taking off. There's so many gardeners around the world that are listening to the thing. It's crazy. It's something like 1.7 million downloads right now. It's in 90 different countries. I'm amazed at the cities in the United States that listen to it. You would think that the top 10 would be all California cities, but no, like number 4 is Seattle, number 5 is Chicago, number 6 is New York. And so we try to make it as universal as possible, the information. It's not as easy because, as we all know, all gardening is local, but we give it our best effort. Thank you for listening to the podcast, by the way. It's available wherever you get your podcast or at gardenbasics.net. Okay, I'm done with the commercials.
That I so appreciated what he did for the horticulture community, both with the radio show and with the podcast, that I made myself available as much as I could. When I was working full time, including weekends, nights, I would drag myself over to the radio station when he asked me to, because I so appreciate that information getting out, that quality gardening information. And he went to the podcast and I said, whatever I can do to help, I'll be there. And so I totally appreciate what you do, Fred.
One thing that I respond to when she mentions a lot of things to me as we're recording, I will say, I did not know that, because it's amazing how much knowledge she has about gardening. And we have thrown out a lot of great information. And this little talk here is sort of a distillation of some very interesting garden topics, garden tricks, if you will, that you can have a more successful garden. And everybody has a favorite. One of my favorite. Anybody here grow peppers from seed? Do you know? And you know how long it takes to germinate them? Weeks. I mean, if you use heat, it helps. Debbie here gave us a little trick that can cut that time in half, down to a week and a half.
In teaching college, you work in a semester. You know, you gotta figure out what you're going to do, and you want the students to be successful. So knowing that peppers took a long time to germinate from seed, I did some Googling, the not reliable source, but I'm always willing to try. And what worked was soaking the pepper seeds in hydrogen peroxide for 10 minutes. Yeah, shortens their germination time and you get a much more even germination of the seeds. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. So it's water with an extra oxygen in it. And I don't know the science of it. I don't really care. I like science. I like to know why we do things, but the fact that it works was great, and it gave the students success.
My overlords at the University of California would be shaking their heads at this point, going, you need scientific research.
Right. That's what they want.
But if it works, it works.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it works.
Yeah.
So add that to your list of tricks for germinating pepper seeds is to soak those seeds first for 10 minutes in hydrogen peroxide. Doesn't take much.
Hydrogen peroxide doesn't taste like much, but no, it doesn't affect the flavor or the color or the plant in any way. It just helps those seeds, that baby plant that's inside that seed, to get its root out and get started.
Not only does she come up with her own little tricks and tips, she gets a lot of tips from her students.
Yeah.
And one of them was very clever, especially if you deal with small seeds. I forget what the seeds were in question.
I don't know, but they would apply to pepper seeds. They're not.
Well, peppers are kind of big, but you talk about carrot seeds.
Well, yeah, little tiny ones.
How do you separate those carrot seeds so you're not planting a clump of them at once?
Yeah, this wasn't my idea, but he takes a chopstick, dips it in water, and then dips it in the seeds gently. And the seed attaches to the water, and then you plant it. Knock it off, and then do it again. Pretty simple.
There you go.
Yeah. When the students got their seeds, they would open them, and I got the little ones. So it was a positive thing for them.
How many of you have been planting lately? Your tomatoes and peppers. Usually the process might be, all right, I've got the tomato plant here. I'll dig a hole, plop in the tomato plant, put the dirt back around it, and then water it. Debbie says don't do that.
Well, it's particularly important if you're planting into containers because container media can be hydrophobic, meaning it doesn't easily absorb water. But wetting the media you're going to put your plant into, and also if the plant is in a container, wetting that so that it's wet into wet. We worked a lot with containers at school. We had some outdoor planting areas too, but if you don't wet that container media, it may never get wet. You'll think it's wet. You'll water it, and the water will go down and around and out the bottom. So I did it. I watered it. It came out the bottom. Well, it never got into the media. So you have to sort of work it with your hands, get it wet, then put it in the container and put your plant in with that.
I like your tip about pre-watering a bunch at once by putting that soil into a bucket, filling the bucket with water, and then sticking your hands in and stirring it all up.
Yeah, I use kitty litter boxes, the plastic ones, and put the media. I can never just pour it out of a container, out of a bag. I have to mess with it. So I put in all my little components and mix them together and wet it, and then that's when you get your hands dirty.
Oh, now you said components.
Yeah, I did say components.
So what are you putting in your potting
me, Fred.
Yeah, I know. I've carried bags of pumice for you.
Yes, you did. The classic recipe for containers is peat perlite vermiculite, a little bit of lime to counteract the acidity of the peat moss, and you may or may not choose to put in other nutrients. And we did that forever. That's the Cornell mix. If you Google it, you'll get the Cornell mix. That's the classic. I learned that at Rutgers when I got my bachelor's degree. They talked about it at Davis when I got my master's degree. The Cornell mix. What it comes down to, though, is an organic component, the peat moss being the organic component. You can use coir, you can use compost, but some sort of organic component. And then the perlite perlite and vermiculite are both made from rocks. Perlite is the white stuff, and vermiculite is mica, like the gold-colored rocks that have been expanded so that there are layers in there. And because they're bigger, they both create airspace between the organic particles. Perlite, I really don't like. I have a little bit of it in my potting area for seed starting, but if you've ever opened a bag of perlite, tell us what happened. Dust everywhere. So I'd have the students put the water in open it and then put the water in, and then the bag gets heavy and it gets wet, and it doesn't wet everything, and we still have dust. So one semester we tried pumice, which is volcanic rock. Maybe a little more environmentally conscious because you don't have to heat it. It's already perlite is mined and then crushed and then heated to make it pop bigger, and so is mica. So is vermiculite, but pumice is naturally heated by the lava, the volcano process. However, it has to be shipped, obviously, and it's heavy. It's much heavier. It worked great to improve the drainage in that container soil. It took place of the perlite, and it did not have that dustiness to it, but it held a little bit more water. and it made the pots heavy. And that's where the students complained because it held water and it gave it up to the plants very well. It created air spaces in the media, which is good for the roots. The vermiculite crushes over time. And so it goes from being a puffed up rock that holds water, but also creates open spaces around it for water and air to travel and roots to travel. But over time, it crushes. And so I use the bagged media. Depends what I'm growing. If I'm starting from seed, I don't want any forest products in it. Otherwise, forest products are okay. So take some organic matter and I'll mix it with the pumice. Sometimes I put in vermiculite, sometimes I don't.
Going back to vermiculite.
Yes.
You have gotten me into the habit now whenever I'm planting seeds that have to be planted very shallow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they need light, but you still need to cover them with something in order to keep them from blowing away.
You're right.
And vermiculite solves that problem.
Sure
because,
does.
as you pointed out, it allows light. It concentrates light so it gets the light it wants while keeping it in place.
Right. So that puffed up, I think of it as an accordion mica, shiny mica, holds water within itself, but it's shiny, so it reflects light onto the seed. If a seed is to be planted on the surface or just barely covered, it's probably because it needs light. They may tell you that, they may not tell you that, but I'll do it in the garden if I've started even big stuff from seed, just so I know where I put the seed, so I don't have to write all those tags. And I'll just put one tag and then I'll put little piles of vermiculite wherever the seed was. I'm knowing that it's not going to bury the seed too deeply. And if the seed needs light, it's going to allow that into the seed.
Yeah, use it as a seed marker. It works. I think a lot of us know that after a rainstorm, you shouldn't be going out onto your garden and walking on the soil because it compacts the soil. It removes air pockets from the soil. But Debbie once pointed out, rain does the same thing, especially a torrential rainstorm. It, too, can compact the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get around that?
Have you ever seen the picture of the water droplet hitting the soil and all the particles coming up? Water is very powerful stuff. It can dig holes in soil. It's used for that sometimes, but you don't want it to compact your soil. So you need to cover your soil, and the ideal thing is an organic mulch. So I flag down arborists. You can call their office too and make an appointment, and they'll drop off a load. It's huge, but a load of mulch of their chipped trees. That's the best thing for a woody plant garden. Roses would be in that category. There are some big chunks, but the way they stack, they don't compact on themselves. There's been lots of research done about whether they carry disease. So the arborist might say, oh, you don't want this. It's got blah, blah, blah disease. There's been lots of research that the disease does not transmit when it is made, when the plant is chipped and then laid out. It's because you've changed the environment. Disease is about the pathogen, the environment, and the host. You have to have all three. Pathogen might be there. The host might be there, but the environment has just changed because it's no longer a standing tree.
The same is true of insect eggs as well, that if they're taking a tree down and maybe the tree had termites, for example, the chipping and shredding process will destroy the eggs too. And by mixing all the different sizes, what goes into a chipper shredder comes out, it's all different sizes. Mm-hmm. It's perfect because the smaller parts break down first and feeds the soil, and the other parts follow.
Right.
And it's a nice slow feed for your garden.
It is. Yeah.
You want to start the backyard fruit and nut orchard of your dreams, but maybe you don't know where to begin. Or maybe you're currently growing fruit and nut trees and you've got a million questions, such as what are the tastiest fruits to grow? Where can I go to buy some of these delectable fruit and nut trees you've been reading about? And then how do you care for all of these trees, including planting, pruning, and harvesting? I've got one online stop in mind for you where all these questions you might have will get answered. It's DaveWilson.com. That's Dave Wilson Nursery, the nation's largest wholesaler of fruit and nut trees for the backyard garden. They have planting tips, taste test results, and links to nurseries in your area that carry Dave Wilson fruit trees. Click on the Home Garden tab at davewilson.com for all of these links, including a link to their years of informative videos about growing fruit and nut trees that they've posted on the Dave Wilson Nursery YouTube channel. Start the backyard orchard of your dreams at davewilson.com. Chances are, if you have raised garden beds and you're using drip irrigation, you're not watering long enough, and you're probably not getting even coverage throughout your raised beds. In Friday's Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter, we share some secrets for improving your watering with drip irrigation on raised garden beds. The Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter comes out every Friday, and it's available for both free and paid subscribers. Paid subscribers get some added perks. We have a new Monday publication for paid subscribers. It concentrates on streamlining current garden tasks in order for you to have a more successful harvest of food and flowers. Another benefit of being a paid subscriber to Beyond the Garden Basics, paid subscribers also have complete access to the previous posts of the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter, for which there are now 200 editions. For example, how can you tell the good bugs from the bad bugs? We had the pictures and the info of the garden good guys way back in late April and early May of 2024. It was part of a two-part series called Meet the Beneficials. Want to know which roses make the best cut flowers for indoor displays? We had that in the May 19th, 2023 edition of the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter. And right now, you just might be doing battle with the aphids that are enjoying all the new growth on your just planted garden. We had aphid control tips back in the September 15th, 2021 edition of the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter. Again, only paid subscribers have access to that extensive back catalog of past editions of the newsletter. By the way, your paid subscription to the newsletter supports not only the ongoing efforts to produce the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter, but also helps keep the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast freely available each week wherever you get your podcasts. Find out more information about the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter in several places, including today's show notes, also at our homepage, gardenbasics.net, or at farmerfred.com, or at Substack. And thank you for your support and encouragement to help keep the good garden conversation going. Let's get back to our conversation with Debbie Flower, recorded live at a meeting of the Sacramento Rose Society. More tips for garden success. Reaction wood, which to me sounds like a slightly dirty phrase, but actually reaction wood, if you are growing plants from seedling, is something you want those seedlings to develop. And that's why in your arsenal of growing plants from seeds, Debbie says, hey, get a fan.
Yeah, reaction wood is maybe a little bit of a misnomer. It does exist, but reaction tissue is maybe a better way of saying it, because at the time you're growing a seedling, you don't have wood. You just have soft tissue. You go to the gym. Why do you go to the gym? To beef up your muscles. Plants don't have muscles, but they have this reaction tissue that forms in response to a stimulant. And the stimulant needs to be movement. The first experiment that was done that I was told about at Davis was grad students, and they would go out to the greenhouse where the seedlings were and shake the table for 10 minutes. So the seedlings are going like this, you know? Exactly. So that's what you do. Where I start my seeds, I have a fan. It's 10 minutes a day. So I have an oscillating fan on a timer, and it goes back and forth. I leave it on for a half hour, hoping everybody gets their little 10 minutes. And that will strengthen the stem. They should be shorter and the stem's fatter. The plant itself shorter and the stem's chubbier. And you've developed a nice, strong stem, which will stand up better. You know, it goes from wherever you started it, where it's coddled and with temperature and water and all that stuff. And then you move it to outdoors, where the temperature and the water and the light and the wind are all irregular. It can stand up to that much better if you start it with a fan.
Of course, this time of year, you can start a lot of seeds outdoors in containers. I just started some chard seeds, for example. So we have greens for the summertime, and Swiss chard does fine planted on the north side of the house for the summertime. You'll have greens year round. I went to the nursery the other day to see if they had any chard there, and they just looked at me like I was weird and said, no, we got rid of that a long time ago. Okay, buddy, thanks. Went to the seed rack.
Got the seed.
Got some bright light Swiss chard. It'll be up. It's the summer greens.
Yes.
Yeah. And since they're going to be growing outside in containers because the overnight temperatures are in the 50s,
right,
and they're in a protected area, they get all the natural movement they need.
Mm-hmm. Yes, when you're starting indoors in a greenhouse or in my guest room in my last house, don't visit me during seed starting season because the fan is on the bed and the light is hanging from the ceiling. It would be very inconvenient.
I think you had sort of the same deal with a waterbed.
I did have a waterbed, but that's a different story.
Oh, that's a different story. Okay. Oh, that was a heater. That was your.
When we got rid of the waterbed, you put heat. You can get. You had the heating thing. Anybody ever had a waterbed? Yeah, the heating thing. You're not that old. The heating pad under the bag of water to warm it up, and I kept that and I use it as a seed starting mat. It's made so it can get wet. It's about the right temperature. I've since purchased regular seed starting mats also, but that works too if you happen to have one hanging around.
How many of you get out in the garden every day? Well, of course. Why else?
We're at a garden club.
We're at a garden club. I mean, of course you would. That is probably, according to Debbie, one of the best things you can do.
You gotta see what's going on. Everything starts in one place. The insect infestation, the fungal infestation, the damage to the branch, it all starts in one place. If you catch it at that one place, it doesn't become a big problem. If you have a hedge of all the same species and one plant starts to look poorly and you catch that, now maybe it's just that plant, maybe it's got the root system is circling, girdling, it's killing it, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's got a disease or an insect. And if you catch it there, you're not going to lose your whole hedge. So walk around, and while you're walking, especially this time of year, with your favorite beverage, you use your other hand to pull the weeds because you want to get them before they set seed, before it sets seed, because that's how you prevent the weeds from spreading from place to place. If you wait months and then go out, they're all in seed, and then the seeds are blowing around, and then you've got a bigger weed problem.
Unless you have hairy bittercress, and then you might as well just move. And it's also known as pop seed. And once hairy bittercress sets its little flower, it's a dainty little flower, and you go to pull it out, it's a little explosion that takes place. You can find hairy bittercress on YouTube and watch the seeds explode, and they travel for tens of feet.
Well, you weren't there soon enough because you should have gotten it before it set seed.
But it's very insignificant before it sets a flower.
It's a very small plant, and I learned it as little bittercress, common names, and it likes moist, shady places. So look there for it.
BISS, B-I-S-S, before it sets seeds. Yes. If you ever want to make Debbie mad, here's what you do. You plant your plant, and then the small container you have, just, put it over on a table. And then when you're done with your tools, go put them away.
I thought that's what you were going to say.
And, look out, because you didn't clean them.
Right. It's easiest to clean a container after right when you take the plant out of it. Things are moist, the soil is loose, clean it. And the reason for cleaning it, is to reuse it. If you're going to reuse it, you want to get rid of all the media that's in the container because soil-borne diseases are carried in media. So you don't want to, especially with seeds, damping off is a seedling disease. It's only a seedling disease. But if it's in the media and you haven't washed it out of the container, you're going to lose the entire container of seedlings.
And clean your tools. Don't forget to clean your tools.
And my husband gets in the doghouse a lot for not cleaning the tools. I'll go in the garage and say, who did that?
Another thing you brought up, and it was one of these I did not know that moments, was when you were talking about storing tools in the garage. If the garage has a concrete floor, put them in upside down. Put them handle down first. Don't let the metal part rest on that floor.
Yeah, water can seep up through concrete and make contact with your metal tools and cause them to rust.
Now, is that an East Coast thing?
Well, I'm sure it's more of a problem in the East Coast. Talk about getting around. I've lived in New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, Arizona, Portland, Oregon, Reno, Nevada, and here, and gardened in all those places. And the rules change everywhere. So it's definitely a bigger problem in a moisture climate like the East Coast.
Okay. But it's not a bad practice to get into, is putting the handle on the ground.
Right. Value your tools.
Not the metal part. Yeah. That way you don't run into it either. Of course, it might fall on your head. There's
right, your head could bash into it.
Well, that's life. How many of you have ever put gravel or styrofoam or other inert ingredients in the bottom of a pot, a container pot that has drainage, has drain holes. But you figure, I want to save some money on potting soil. I only need to fill it 3/4 of potting soil, and I'll just put some gravel at the bottom. I can save some money, and the gravel will anchor the container, and I'll live happily ever after. Actually, you just created a freeway jam up.
It is a legitimate thing to do in really big containers. I'm thinking of the interior scapers I know who do those giant containers that are almost as big as you are, and they're growing annuals or even just shrubs in the top. 2 feet would be plenty of media, and they have another 4 feet below, and they do try to fill that with something inert. But our containers at home, okay, and it's on the internet all over the place, that it improves drainage. It does not improve drainage. The way water moves in soil is it travels on the surface of the media. Water is attracted to water. It's H2O. So there's an oxygen and a hydrogen. Hydrogen is positive, oxygen is negative. Along comes another water, and they hook up by the positive and negative charges. And so you end up with a chain of water. So water follows water. You drop it on a clean table, it just makes a bubble, right? Because water is attached to water. And then it attaches to the media particles, which also have a charge. And so it doesn't just drop through the air in the container soil, it travels along the edge of the particles. So you have your container soil, which is a tighter mix than the ping pong balls or rocks you put in the bottom of the container. And the water travels all along the edges of the media, and it comes to this place where there isn't as much surface area. Like you were talking about the surface area of the biochar. Comes to a place where the surface area is less. There's the ping pong balls or the stones have less surface area per square foot. And so the water can't all keep going. So it has to stop. And it builds up in the media above, and you create a saturation. Saturation means there's no oxygen in that soil, and you can rot the plant. So get the right size container. You don't need to put anything in the bottom of it. You don't need to put a coffee filter. You don't need to put a screen. If you're using wet media for the container, yes, a tiny bit will drop through, but that's all. And then you just plant right into that container. So get the right depth and use it all.
The other thing to do when planting in a container is maybe raise that container off the ground a little bit. When I prune my fruit trees, I like to stick some 1/2-inch diameter or 1-inch diameter, 8-10-inch long fruit tree prunings underneath my pots to help keep the air flowing and keep the roots from falling in love with the ground below the pot.
Growing it out the hole and into the ground. Right. Yeah, that is a natural place. The holes, the drain holes, do the same thing as the rocks or the ping pong balls in the bottom of your container. It does slow down the loss of the water because there's nothing there for it to attach to until it finds the edge of the hole and goes down. It's all a chemical thing, all about ions and pluses and minuses and stuff like that, charges. I have a whole collection of outdoor plants in containers, which are all going to end up in the ground someday, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I put them on preferably rollers so that I can move them around and sweep under them and that sort of thing. But it gets them up off the ground. It prevents them from rooting into the ground if that's where they are.
There was a time 20, 30 years ago when HGTV actually did a lot of G and not as much H as they do now. And I was on one of those garden shows, and I was demonstrating how to plant a citrus tree in a barrel. And I told the production crew, get me a dolly, get me some rollers I can put under the barrel so I can demonstrate how easily it is to move to protect the citrus tree. In case of a frost, you can move it closer to the house. Well, they bought some rollers, and I put the barrel on it. Everything's fine. Then I put the soil in the barrel and the citrus tree, and then went to move the whole thing, and it just collapsed. The rollers just collapsed. So if you're going to use a half barrel and you want to be able to roll it around, get yourself some furniture dollies to move it around with. It's fun when you go to start a garden and you're outside. You go, yeah, I'm going to put tomatoes over here and the flowers over here. Wouldn't it make more sense if you maybe step back into the house to do that?
I like to landscape I'm not a designer. That's something I think that's a gene and I don't have that gene. But I know what I want to look at when I look out the window. And so I design my garden from the inside to look out the window. I want to see my vegetable garden from at least one window in the house. When I had a landscaper come to do the hardscape and stuff, and he said, "Oh, you don't want it there." I said, "Yes, I do. I want to know what's going on." Yes, I do try to walk my yard every day, but you don't always get to everything. I want to know what's going on there. I want a pretty, out my kitchen window, a big window over my sink. There's a bird bath with a dripper and a tree for them to land in, and then plants for the hummingbirds. And, it creates a whole environment, and I can sit there and do dishes and be really happy. So designing from the inside out, I should have not put as much patio outside my bedroom window because it faces southwest. Guess what I need? Shade. So I have a couple of horse troughs as a result with plants in them, but designed from the inside out.
By the way, if you use cattle watering troughs, as a lot of people are doing now for shrubs and blueberries and things like that, there's usually a side plug there. Go the extra step and drill some holes through the bottom of those things to get better drainage, and then set it on some bricks to raise it off the ground. And your blueberries will thank you. I know the robins are thanking me for the blueberries right now because I'm here and they're there.
I have bamboo in my troughs, and I did not drill extra holes, and I did not put them up on bricks. I just pulled that drain on the side. Now, this may be unique to bamboo. I had one trough of bamboo dye, flower and dye, which is what bamboo does. And so I had to empty it to start again. And all of the rhizomes were down, the stems were down in the bottom, at the bottom of the pot. That's where that water collects, and that's where they like to go. So I have had success with bamboo in those pots just by pulling the side plug and using that for drainage. The negative thing that's happened is the solder has rusted. So now when the water leaks out, I get rust stains on my patio.
There's that. Yeah.
Years, 5 years, 8 years, something like that. And I just had to have a big drainage problem dealt with in my backyard, and concrete was taken out and put back in. And those guys actually picked up, I didn't think we could move them, picked up the troughs and moved them. It wasn't ugly underneath. It wasn't all green and slimy or anything. It was dry. But I do have these rust stains in another part of the yard.
We've gone through 10 tips. I think that's pretty good. All right. Thank you so much for inviting us here. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Friday, and it's brought to you by Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics is available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, as well as an accurate transcript of the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net. And thank you so much for listening and your support.